make this brief micro lecture, and it's really is going to be a brief overview of strategy. Strategy is a subject that requires another degree, maybe two, maybe three, even. I mean, it's a pretty big topic. So we're just going to cover it to the extent that we need to understand it, how marketing fits in. Uh, but why is it important? Marketing plans need to fit the strategy like a glove. If you don't have marketing plans that really fit the strategies of the organization, um, it's probably going to get rejected because it would seem like a distraction from what you're trying to do. And it kind of defines what strategy is. Marketing as a function usually has a huge role in strategic planning because they understand the marketplace and where they're going with it, where things are going. Okay, so the textbook definition is business strategy is strategic initiatives a company pursues to create value for the organization and stakeholders and gain a competitive advantage in the market. This strategy is crucial to the company's success and is needed before any goods or services are produced or delivered. So it's one of those things that you really have to think all the way through. But I highlighted the create value for the organization and its stakeholders is basically what marketing is attempting to do as well. Um, Along those same lines, this is from Harvard Business School's online business strategy course. An effective strategy is built around three key questions. How can my business create value for my customers? How can my business create value for my employees? And how can my business create value by collaborating with suppliers? That first one obviously is smack dab in the middle of what marketing does. So here's another one of my maxims of marketing. Strategy answers this question. Why does anyone even care that this organization exists? And depending on who you ask, you might get a different answer. That should be what the strategy of the organization is. So why is it important? Again, this is from that Harvard Business School class. A business strategy is foundational to a company's success, helps leaders set organizational goals, and gives companies a competitive edge. Determines various business factors, including price, how to price the goods and services, suppliers, whether to source materials sustainably or from which suppliers, employee recruitment, how do we attract and maintain talent, and resource allocation, how do we allocate resources effectively. So that's why strategy is important. It really ultimately gives us focus. Okay. So strategy formulation is a process. You define your vision, you set your top level objectives, you analyze your business and the market, you define how to gain competitive advantage, and you build a strategy framework. Uh, in defining your vision, there's two key statements that need to be determined. And you've probably heard these before, but it's, quite often these things are not well understood. Mission statements are a statement of the purpose of the organization in the present tense. That's why we're here and what we're trying to do. Vision statement is thinking about it in the future. What do we expect ourselves to be? When we define a mission statement, I do this with some of my customer clients, I should say. We take the time to figure out what do we do, who do we do it for, how do we do it, who and what value are we bringing to it. So it's really important to be careful not to have too broad a definition because it starts to lack meaning. So here's some examples of one. Express Scripts is a company dedicated to making the use of prescription drugs safer and more affordable for plan sponsors and over 50 million members and their families. It's a pharmaceutical benefits administration organization. Um, that's a pretty big organization with 50 million members. So as you can see, it's a really a pretty good mission statement because it says who you're doing what for. Okay. Be the most efficient and innovative global provider of semiconductor solutions is Micron's. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples. Here's some vision statements. Alzheimer's Association, they say a world without Alzheimer's disease. Now, obviously not the current state, but what their vision is for the future. Teach for America. One day, all children in this nation will have an opportunity to obtain an excellent education. So that's their vision. Okay. And Microsoft, at its founding, had one that says a computer on every desk and in every home. Obviously, that's not the present state, but it gives you a vision in terms of where they want to go. Okay. Now, as you saw, one of the steps in the planning process is to break down the mission into manageable outcomes. So here's some examples of objectives that are tied to the mission statement. So let's say the mission statement is to be the lowest price choice. We might want to have as a strategic objective reducing our expenses by 5% by the year 2025. If we want to be the fastest growing, we might make a statement along the lines of open new locations in 5 key markets by 2025. If we want to be the most highly rated, increase our average online rating from 3.5 to 4.5 stars in 2 years. Believe it or not, I've seen that actually fairly commonly uh, crafted into the strategic objectives of a firm. If we want to have the most satisfied customers, we should reduce customer service complaints in half in 3 years. And if we want to be the largest, we might want to acquire our 3 largest competitors in 5 years. So those are just examples of strategic objectives. To analyze your business and the market, there's lots and lots of ways to do that. One you'll probably hear about frequently in your education is something called SWOT analysis, which refers to strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are things that you identify about internally within your organization that are positive or negative, hence the strengths and the weaknesses. And the opportunities and threats are external to the organization. So those are things that you look at that way. When we discuss targeting, we'll talk about some of those things. One of the things that a lot of firms try to do is create something called a core competency and something you do better than any competitor ongoing. These can be very, very helpful statements of strategy that really matter a lot. Sometimes it's called a sustainable competitive advantage. And a lot of companies have identified those. The ones that don't are usually struggle a little bit, to compete. So let's take a look at Honda. We all know who Honda is. What's their core competence? By their own definition, they say our core competence is to design, engineer, and produce highly reliable, small, high output engines. Now you would think like, well, I thought it'd be make reliable cars or something, But they're saying that's what their core competence is. That's what they do better than their competitors. Okay, so this is a cross-cut picture of the VTEC engine. They were the first ones to come out with that variable valve timing. We're not going to get into the mechanics of mechanics right now, but they have had some massive uh, innovations in the internal combustion engine. So Conoco fits right in with what they consider their core competency to be. So they make these engines to go into, we know motorcycles, we know cars, but did you know boats? They have a marine division and jet aircraft. They actually have jet aircraft engines as well. So you can see how they're leveraging their core competence in designing and engineering and producing highly reliable, small, high output engines. That's what they do. Who would have guessed it, right? So what's next is we're going to define and create our target market. That's a very, very important step in our plan. So we're going to go through the basics of it, and we'll talk about how we're going to actually do that in class. I know this was super brief. I know that only gave you an overview, but I hope you got a taste of it. The main takeaway of this is marketing has to fit very well within the overall strategy of the organization. Your plan has to fit in. We call that strategic fit. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on, and we'll conclude this presentation. If you have any questions, certainly don't hesitate to ask.